I'm Marvin, I'm 24, and last weekend I realized just how invisible I am to my own family. It hit me in the face like a bucket of ice water. No big screaming match, no dramatic fight, just a quiet, humiliating moment that told me everything I needed to know about where I stand with them. Growing up, my parents were always loud about how much they loved us equally. They'd say it at every birthday, every holiday, every casual Tuesday dinner. "We don't play favorites," my dad used to say, clapping my brother on the back after another baseball trophy. But even as a kid, I could feel the difference. My older brother, Dylan, was the golden child. Straight A student, star athlete, everyone's favorite dinner guest. I was the quiet one, the kid who loved books and built little robots out of scraps in the garage. I didn't get in trouble, didn't cause problems, but it never felt like that counted for much. When Dylan graduated high school 3 years ago, it was like a royal coronation. My parents rented out a banquet hall. There were balloons, banners, a DJ, and what must have been 100 people in the room cheering for him. The night ended with a huge reveal. They rolled out the garage door to show Dylan's surprise, a shiny $30,000 car with a bow on it. My mom cried. My dad looked proud. Dylan acted modest, but couldn't hide his grin. I clapped with everyone else, pretending to be happy, but I remember going to bed that night staring at my ceiling and thinking, this is the standard now. This is what graduating means in this family. Fast forward to last weekend, my turn. I walked across the stage, accepted my degree in computer engineering, and felt this swell of pride. For years of late nights, side jobs, ramen dinners, and grinding through classes that made my head hurt, I did it. I texted my parents to let them know I'd be coming by after the ceremony. They said, "Sure, we'll have something waiting for you." When I got there was no party, no relatives, no banners, just my parents sitting at the kitchen table with a leftover grocery store cake, already half-eaten, and a $20 gift card for a restaurant I don't even like. Dylan was there too, leaning against the counter scrolling on his phone, looking bored. I just stood there for a second, thinking maybe it was a joke, maybe the real surprise was coming later. But my mom smiled like she'd just done me a favor and said, "Be happy we remembered it all. You know how busy we are." I felt this cold anger rise in my chest. I didn't yell. I didn't throw the cake in the trash or say anything dramatic. I just took out my phone, snapped a picture of the celebration, the half-melted frosting, the crooked gift card envelope, and put my phone back in my pocket. "Thanks," I said, forcing a smile. "I appreciate it." I went upstairs, grabbed the overnight bag I'd packed the night before, because some part of me must have known, and walked right back out. Dylan didn't even look up. My parents didn't follow me. That night, I signed a lease on a tiny studio apartment across town. The place is nothing special, peeling paint, old carpet, but it's mine. I spent hours cleaning it, laying out the air mattress I'd just bought, putting my diploma on the counter like a trophy. By morning, my phone had 32 missed calls, 18 texts, and 3 voicemails from my parents asking where I was, why I stormed off. How could I do this to them on such a special day? My dad's last text said, "We're disappointed in you." I stared at the screen for a long time. Disappointed in me? After years of watching them bend over backward for Dylan and toss me scraps? That was the moment something shifted. I decided I wasn't going to be quiet about this anymore. And that's where things started to get complicated, because once I stopped playing along, my parents started showing just how far they were willing to go to keep me in my place. I didn't respond to any of their messages that morning. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had the power to just not engage. No polite explanations, no groveling to make peace. I just put my phone face down and made a pot of coffee in my new apartment. The place still smelled faintly of bleach from cleaning the night before, and it was quiet, eerily quiet, but I liked it. There was no sound of Dylan blasting music down the hall, no parents arguing over whose turn it was to mow the lawn. Just me and my coffee and my thoughts. Around noon, my mom finally drove over. She didn't knock. She just let herself in because I'd stupidly given her the address a month ago when I'd mentioned I was thinking about moving out. She stood in the doorway of my tiny kitchen, looking around like she'd stepped into a crime scene. "This is where you ran off to," she said, her voice tight. "You made your father sick with worry last night." I didn't look up from my coffee. "I'm fine. Clearly, you know where I am, so you don't have to worry anymore." She huffed like I'd just insulted her. "We wanted to celebrate you last night, Marvin." But you didn't even stay for cake. I laughed, an ugly, sharp sound that startled even me. You call that a celebration? I asked. Dylan got a car and a hall full of people. I got a melted cake and a gift card for 20 bucks. You really think that's the same thing? Her face hardened immediately. So this is about Dylan again. Marvin, life isn't about keeping score. Your brother works hard. He deserves what he gets. I felt my jaw tighten. I worked hard too, Mom. You just didn't notice. She shook her head and muttered something under her breath about me being ungrateful. Then she turned and left, slamming the door so hard my picture frame rattled on the counter. That afternoon, Dylan sent me a text. No context, just a picture of him washing his car, the car they gave him for graduating, with the caption, "Don't be salty, little bro." I stared at it for a full minute before blocking his number. The next few days were strange. I still had to go over to my parents' house to pick up a few boxes of stuff I hadn't moved yet, and every time I walked in, the air felt heavier. My dad wouldn't look at me. My mom would only speak to me in clipped sentences. Dylan, of course, made it worse, tossing little comments over his shoulder like, "Hey, don't scratch the paint on my car, Marvin," or "You should be grateful Mom even remembered your graduation." The final straw came 3 days later when I stopped by to grab the last of my things, my books and the small 3D printer I'd bought with my own money. As I carried the box out to my car, I heard my mom talking on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't know I was still there. "I don't know what's wrong with him," she was saying. "He's just jealous. Always has been. Dylan would never pull something like this. Marvin's always been different. Ungrateful. Maybe this will teach him some responsibility." That one word, different, hit me like a slap. I stood there in the hallway, clutching the box until my knuckles went white. I wanted to walk in there and confront her, but instead I just left, loaded the box into my car, and drove away without saying a word. That night, I got a long text from my dad. It said that if I didn't apologize for disrespecting my mother, they were going to reconsider the financial help they'd promised me for grad school. That's when I realized what this really was: control. It wasn't about family or love or fairness. It was about making sure I stayed in my assigned role. The quiet kid. The afterthought. The one who never rocked the boat. I didn't sleep much that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling of my new apartment, listening to the hum of the fridge. I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent growing up. The birthdays where Dylan got a mountain of gifts and I got a single card with 10 bucks in it. The vacations where I got stuck on the pull-out couch while Dylan got the actual bed. The arguments where my parents would take his side before I'd even finished explaining my point. It wasn't a one-time thing. It was a pattern. And now they were using money as a leash to pull me back into line. The next morning, I went back to my parents' house one more time, not to beg, but to get the last piece of leverage they had over me. My name was on one of their bank accounts, the one they'd set up for my future education. I withdrew every cent and opened my own account at a different bank. It wasn't much, just a few thousand, but it was mine now. When my mom found out later that day, she called me furious. "You had no right to do that," she yelled. "That money was for school." "It's still for school," I said calmly. "I just don't want you holding it over my head." She hung up on me. That's when the texts from extended family started rolling in. My aunt texted me saying my mom was crying her eyes out because I was being cruel. My grandmother left me a voicemail saying I should just apologize and come home. Even Dylan chimed in again, calling me dramatic and selfish. I realized then that they weren't just trying to punish me. They were trying to rewrite the story. In their version, I was the villain who'd abandoned my poor, loving family over nothing. And maybe that would have worked before. Maybe I would have caved, apologized, gone back to pretending everything was fine. But this time, something in me had snapped. I didn't reply to a single one of those messages. I went to class. I went to work. I came home to my little apartment and cooked my own dinner. I could feel the distance growing between me and them with every silent day, and strangely, I felt lighter because of it. But then came the moment that really set everything in motion. The moment that turned this from a quiet family disagreement into something bigger, something I couldn't ignore. It happened the following weekend at Dylan's belated graduation party, a party I hadn't been invited to but ended up seeing with my own eyes. I wasn't planning to go to Dylan's graduation party. In fact, I had purposely made plans with a couple of friends from school to get lunch that day, just so I wouldn't have to think about it. But then one of those friends posted a story on Instagram, and there it was, my parents' backyard, packed with people, music blasting, a buffet table groaning under catered food. It was exactly like Dylan's first graduation party 3 years ago. Only this time, there was one key difference. As I clicked through the story, my stomach twisted. My parents were smiling and laughing. Dylan was hamming it up with his friends, and in the middle of the yard was a massive banner that read, "Congratulations, Dylan and Marvin." I actually sat there staring at my phone for a full minute trying to process what I was seeing. My name, on a banner, at Dylan's party. I wasn't invited. They had thrown my graduation party, the one I never got, as a footnote to his. I don't even know how I got there. One second I was sitting on my couch, the next I was driving across town, hands gripping the wheels so hard they hurt. I didn't even knock when I got there. I just walked into the backyard, and it was like a movie scene where the music stops. "Oh, look who decided to show up," Dylan called, grinning like this was all some big joke. "We saved you some cake." I looked around and saw it. A small cake on the table with "Congrats M" scribbled on it like an afterthought. Next to it was a stack of envelopes, which I quickly realized were cards from family friends, probably full of money. The kind of cards I should have been handed at my graduation party. I turned to my mom, who was standing there holding a tray of drinks, looking like she'd just been caught red-handed. "You threw my graduation party without me?" I asked, my voice flat. "It wasn't like that," she said quickly, putting the tray down. "We just thought it would be nice to combine things. You know, make it a family event." "A family event?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You didn't even invite me. You didn't call, you didn't text. I had to find out from a friend's Instagram story." My dad finally stepped in, holding up a hand. "Calm down, Marvin. We were going to tell you." "When?" I demanded. "After it was over." People were staring now, whispering to each other. I could feel the heat rising in my face, my heart pounding in my ears. "This is exactly why we didn't make a big deal out of your graduation," my mom snapped suddenly. "You always find a way to make everything about you." I laughed, loud and bitter. "About me?" "It was about me. Or at least, it was supposed to be. But I guess Dylan can't have one single day that doesn't turn into a parade, huh?" Dylan rolled his eyes. "Here we go," he muttered. "Drama Marvin is back." That's when I saw it. A set of keys sitting on the gift table, shiny and new with a little dealership tag still attached. I knew that dealership. I knew those tags. "No," I said, my voice suddenly cold. "You didn't." Dylan grinned and held them up like a trophy. "Pretty sweet, huh? Mom and Dad upgraded me to the new model since I'm heading off to grad school." I stared at him, then at my parents, then back at the banner with my name on it. The banner, the cake, the cards, it was all a prop. They weren't celebrating me. They were using my graduation as an excuse to throw Dylan another party, get him more gifts, and make themselves look like doting parents who treated their kids equally. And then my mom said the thing that snapped whatever fragile thread of patience I had left. "You could have had a nice day too, Marvin," she said, her tone icy. "But you chose to make this difficult. You're the one who moved out. You're the one who's been avoiding us. This is what happens when you separate yourself from the family." I stood there, rooted to the spot, every nerve in my body buzzing. Separate myself from the family? As if I hadn't been excluded for years in 1,000 small ways before I ever packed a single box. Something in me broke right then. I wasn't sad. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was done. I walked over to the gift table, picked up the cake with "Congrats M" on it, and set it gently back down, just enough to make it clear I wasn't taking it. Then I turned to face everyone watching me. "Congratulations, Dylan," I said evenly, my voice carrying across the yard. "Enjoy your new car." And Mom, "Dad, don't ever use my name to make yourselves look good again." Then I turned and walked out, ignoring the whispers, ignoring Dylan's fake cough laugh behind me, ignoring my dad calling my name. I got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and sat there in silence for a long time. I thought I was used to their favoritism. I thought I'd built up a tolerance for it after years of being the afterthought. But seeing my name on that banner, watching them parade around like they'd done me a favor by throwing me a party I wasn't invited to, that cut deeper than anything before. And that night, lying on my air mattress staring at the ceiling, I realized something I hadn't let myself admit before. This wasn't just favoritism. This was erasure. They didn't want me to feel celebrated. They wanted me to play my part, smile in the background, and make Dylan's spotlight shine brighter. That was the night I stopped caring about keeping the peace. And that was the night I decided if they wanted a separation from the family, I was going to give them one they'd never forget. The drive back from the party felt longer than it was. I kept the windows rolled up even though the air was hot and stale, letting the silence press down on me. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. By the time I reached my apartment, I felt hollow, like someone had scooped everything out of me and left me running on fumes. I didn't cry that night. I just sat on the floor with my back against the wall, staring at my phone screen as the notifications rolled in. Group chat messages from relatives. Heard you caused a scene, Marvin. Was that really necessary? Text from my mom. You embarrassed us in front of everyone. You need to grow up. A single, smug message from Dylan. Thanks for making my party memorable. I turned the phone off and tossed it face down on the counter. The next morning, I woke up with that heavy feeling in my chest, the kind you get when you realize the bad thing wasn't just a dream. My apartment felt even smaller than usual. The air mattress creaked as I sat up, and for a moment I wondered if I'd made a mistake moving out. Maybe my parents were right. Maybe I was being dramatic. Maybe if I had just kept my head down, stayed quiet, none of this would have blown up. But then I remembered the banner with my name on it, the smug grin on Dylan's face, the way my mom had said, "This is what happens when you separate yourself from the family." Like my pain was a punishment I'd earned. I got up, made coffee, and sat by the window staring out at the parking lot below. For the next few days, I barely spoke to anyone. I went to class, clocked in at my part-time job, came home, microwaved dinner, and went to bed. No music, no TV, just silence. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. One night, I stopped by my parents' house to grab a package that had been delivered there by mistake. It was late, after 9 p.m., and I thought maybe I'd get in and out without seeing anyone. But when I pulled into the driveway, I saw Dylan's new car parked there, shining under the streetlight like some kind of trophy. I stood there for a long moment, staring at it. It wasn't about the car, not really, but it represented everything. The years of favoritism, the parties, the vacations I was left out of because there wasn't enough room, the quiet, constant message that I was second place. When I stepped inside, the house smelled like dinner, something good, something home-cooked. My mom was at the sink, washing dishes, and when she saw me, her face tightened like she'd bitten into something sour. "You could have called first," she said without turning off the water. "I just came for my package," I said, my voice flat. She dried her hands and crossed her arms. "You know, Marvin, if you'd just apologize, all of this could go away. Your father and I have tried to be patient, but this silent treatment is getting ridiculous." Silent treatment? I let out a sharp laugh. "Mom, I'm not giving you the silent treatment. I'm just done playing along." "Playing along with what?" she demanded. "With this," I said, gesturing around the kitchen. "With pretending everything's fine. With pretending I'm not the second choice every single time. You didn't even invite me to my own graduation party." Her expression didn't soften. "You made that decision when you walked out after your ceremony. Actions have consequences, Marvin. You could have stayed, you could have celebrated with us, but you made your choice." I felt something in me shut down. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I guess I did." I grabbed my package and walked out, ignoring her calling after me. That was the last time I set foot in that house for weeks. The loneliness got worse before it got better. My grandparents called to say they were disappointed in me. My aunt posted a passive-aggressive Facebook status about kids these days having no respect. People I barely knew messaged me asking if the rumors were true, that I'd stormed out of the party, that I was cutting myself off from the family. At work, I started picking up extra shifts just to stay busy. The hours were long, and the pay wasn't great, but it kept me out of my head. I saved every spare dollar, cooking cheap meals and skipping nights out with friends. I told myself it was for grad school, but deep down I knew it was about something more, about building a life that didn't rely on my parents' approval or their money. On the nights I wasn't working, I started researching. Not just grad programs, but jobs, real jobs, ones that could give me a shot at standing on my own 2 feet faster than I'd planned. I spent hours scrolling through job boards, revising my resume, and sending out applications. I didn't tell anyone, not my friends, not my parents. And slowly, something shifted. One night, after a particularly rough shift, I came home to find a letter slipped under my apartment door. It was from my dad. I sat down on the floor and read it under the yellow glow of my cheap lamp. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even kind. It was a lecture about family, about respect, about how they had done everything for me and I had repaid them by humiliating them. It ended with a warning. If you continue down this path, don't expect our support when you need it most. I set the letter down and stared at it for a long time. That's when it hit me. I didn't need their support. Not anymore. The thought was terrifying and freeing at the same time. That night, I opened my laptop and filled out 3 more job applications. Then I researched apartments closer to downtown, not because I planned to move right away, but because I wanted to know what my next step could look like. I started writing down everything. Every slight, every unfair moment, every time they'd used money or guilt to keep me in line. Not because I wanted to stew in it, but because I wanted a record. I wanted to see it all laid out in black and white, so I could remind myself why I couldn't just go back and pretend nothing had happened. The list got long, longer than I expected. It wasn't just the party. It was years of small cuts, years of being told to be the bigger person, of watching Dylan be praised for things I had done first but quieter. Years of hearing, maybe next year, when I asked for things that magically appeared for him without question. And the more I wrote, the more something inside me solidified. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about taking control of my story. Because if I didn't, they were going to keep writing it for me, and they were going to keep painting me as the problem. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I wasn't going to stay on the outside looking in forever. And just as I started to feel steady again, something happened that would push me from quiet planning into action, something that made it clear they weren't done trying to pull me back under their thumb. Things didn't change overnight, but little by little, I could feel the fog lifting. It started with one job application turning into an interview. I sat across from the recruiter in a borrowed dress shirt, palms sweaty, trying not to think about what would happen if I failed. But I didn't fail. 2 weeks later, I was offered a full-time position at a local tech startup doing junior development work. The pay wasn't mind-blowing, but it was more than I'd ever made in my life, and it came with benefits, health insurance, PTO, even a small stipend for continuing education. When I got the offer letter, I didn't call my parents. I didn't post about it online. I just sat in my apartment, staring at the email, and let out a laugh that sounded more like a sigh of relief. This was it. The first brick in the wall I was building between their control and my future. With my new job came a new routine. I started waking up early, making breakfast instead of skipping it, biking to work instead of driving my old car that was constantly on the verge of breaking down. The apartment slowly transformed. The air mattress was replaced with a rail bed. I bought a small secondhand couch, and I hung my diploma on the wall. For the first time, the place felt less like a hiding spot and more like a home. My mental space started to shift too. I still had bad days, moments where I'd see a family photo pop up on social media and feel that old ache in my chest, but they didn't consume me the way they used to. The silence from my parents became easier to bear. In fact, I started to welcome it. It meant no guilt trips, no manipulation, no one dangling money or approval over my head like bait. Dylan, of course, couldn't resist sending little digs every now and then. He'd text a picture of himself on vacation, paid for by my parents, or a photo of his car with some snide comment like, "Hope your little studio apartment's treating you well." I stopped responding. Eventually, I stopped opening them altogether. The more distance I put between myself and them, the more clearly I saw the pattern. I wasn't overreacting. I wasn't the problem. I was just finally refusing to play the part they'd written for me. About 6 months into my new job, I got a raise. Nothing huge, but enough that I could start saving in a way that actually made a difference. I opened a separate account just for that money and started watching it grow, little by little. There was something empowering about seeing those numbers climb, knowing they represented my independence. I also started saying yes to more things outside of work. Dinners with coworkers, weekend hikes, even joining a local robotics club. At first it felt strange, like I was borrowing someone else's life, but soon I realized I was building my own circle, my own support system. These were people who knew me not as Dylan's brother or my parents' quiet kid, but as Marvin, the guy who built a working drone out of spare parts just for fun, who stayed late to help a coworker debug a nightmare piece of code, who actually had opinions worth hearing. And then came the opportunity that changed everything. One Friday, my manager called me into her office. She told me she'd been impressed with my work ethic and problem-solving skills, and there was an opening on a bigger project, one that came with a significant pay bump and the chance to travel for training. It was the kind of role people twice my age were fighting to get. I said yes before she even finished her sentence. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I was working late, learning new systems, sitting in on meetings I never thought I'd be invited to. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. I was getting noticed for the right reasons. Somewhere along the way, I stopped checking my phone for messages from my parents. The constant pressure, the guilt, the tightness in my chest, it all started to fade. When my mom did finally text, asking if I was coming to Dylan's birthday dinner, I read it, set my phone down, and kept working. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt free. The biggest shift, though, happened inside me. One night after work, I sat on my couch with a notebook and looked over the list I'd started months ago. All the moments, all the ways they'd minimized me, dismissed me, pushed me to the sidelines. I added the latest thing, throwing my graduation party without inviting me. And then I put the pen down and stared at the page. For the first time, I didn't just feel like I was cataloging my pain. I felt like I was building a case. Because the truth was, my parents and Dylan still thought I'd eventually come crawling back. They thought this was a phase, that I'd run out of money or hit some wall that would force me to beg for their help. But that wasn't going to happen. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't just want to move on quietly. I wanted them to see me succeed, to see what I could do without their favoritism or control, and I wanted them to feel the loss of the version of me they thought they could keep in their shadow. That was the first night I seriously thought about revenge. Not petty revenge, not yelling in their face revenge, but something bigger. Something that would make them stop and realize they couldn't rewrite the story anymore. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I was getting closer. Every paycheck, every new skill I learned, every project I completed, it was all leading somewhere. And then, just when I thought I was finally at peace with staying out of their orbit, they did something that pulled me right back in. Something that made it clear they weren't done trying to control me, and something that gave me the perfect opening to put my plan into motion. It happened on an otherwise normal Thursday afternoon. I just wrapped up a meeting and was heading out for a late lunch when my phone buzzed. It was a text from my aunt, the one who's usually the family gossip, but, ironically, the only relative who ever treated me like an equal. "Hey Marvin, just so you know, your mom mentioned at dinner last night that she's putting together a family fund for Dylan's grad school tuition. She was complaining about how you took your share early and left them in the lurch. Thought you'd want to know." I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring at the message. My share? The money I withdrew months ago had been mine, in my name. But of course, they were spinning it like I'd stolen something. At first, I was just angry. Angry that they were still talking about me behind my back, still framing me as the problem. But then a thought struck me. If they were pooling money for Dylan's tuition, that meant there was an actual fund somewhere. A family account. Something I hadn't heard about until now. When I got home that night, I sat down with my laptop and started digging through old emails. Sure enough, I found one from almost a year ago with my name on it. My parents had CC'd me when they opened a family education account. Back then, I'd skimmed it and ignored it because I was too busy with finals. But now, reading it carefully, I realized something. They had listed me as a secondary account holder, probably thinking they were being fair. I felt my pulse quicken. Technically, I still had access. I didn't touch a single cent, not yet. But I logged into the account just to see what I was working with. The numbers staring back at me made me sit back in my chair. It wasn't millions, but it was a serious amount of money. More than enough to cover Dylan's tuition, plus a cushion. I closed the laptop and just sat there, thinking. For years, my parents had used money as a way to control me, to reward Dylan and punish me, to dictate what I could and couldn't do, to remind me that my future was tied to their generosity. But now, I had the ability to pull the rug out from under their perfect plan. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them use that money as a weapon against me anymore. I didn't act right away. Instead, I started planning. Over the next few weeks, I quietly got my ducks in a row. I met with a financial advisor at my bank, explaining the situation in general terms, that I had access to funds, that I wanted to make sure everything I did was legal and documented. He confirmed what I suspected. As a listed account holder, I had full rights to withdraw or move the money. That gave me options, but I wasn't in a rush. I wanted this to be more than just a withdrawal. I wanted it to be a statement. Around this time, work offered me the chance to attend a professional conference out of state. I jumped at the opportunity. Not only did it mean more training and exposure, but it also gave me time to think away from the noise of my family's drama. I spent evenings in the hotel room sketching out ideas, writing in my notebook, thinking through every possible outcome. By the time I came back, I had a plan forming in my head. Step 1, strengthen my position. I kept working hard, kept stacking savings, kept building a life that had nothing to do with my parents' approval. I got another small raise, started investing a little, and even signed up for night classes that would make me more competitive for future promotions. Every step I took made me less dependent on them and more confident that I could pull this off. Step 2, watch and wait. I didn't tell anyone about the account, not even my closest friends. Instead, I monitored it quietly. I could see deposits coming in, contributions from relatives, from my parents, all earmarked in their minds for Dylan's bright future. Every time I saw the balance grow, I felt that old mix of anger and determination tighten in my chest. Then, one evening, I got another text from my aunt. Heads up, your mom says they're planning to surprise Dylan with a tuition payment next month. Big family dinner and everything. There it was. My window. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing. I double-checked every document, made sure I had screenshots of the account listing me as a legal holder, made sure the transfer I was planning would leave a clear paper trail. I wasn't going to give them the chance to say I'd done anything shady or behind the back. And then, 3 days before the big dinner, I moved every last dollar out of the family account and into a trust with my name on it. The funds were now legally mine, protected, and completely out of their reach. When I got the confirmation email, I just sat there staring at it, my heart pounding. I wasn't scared. I wasn't even guilty. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was holding the pen. But this wasn't just about taking the money. It was about showing them that they couldn't use me as a prop anymore. That if they wanted me in their picture-perfect family moments, it would have to be on my terms. So when my mom texted me the next day, a cheery message inviting me to Dylan's special dinner, I smiled. I told her I'd be there. Because this time, I wasn't going to walk away quietly. This time, they were going to see exactly who I'd become and exactly how much power I now had. The dinner was set for Saturday night, at the same nice restaurant where we'd celebrated Dylan's first graduation years ago. I got there early, not because I was eager to see them, but because I wanted to control the tempo. I wanted to be settled in, calm and collected, before they walked in and saw me there. The hostess showed me to the long table near the back. It was already set with white tablecloths, polished silverware, and those little candles restaurants use to make things look fancier than they are. I sat down, ordered water, and pulled out my phone one last time to make sure everything was in place. The transfer had gone through days ago. The account now showed a balance of exactly $0. When my parents arrived, they looked surprised to see me already seated. My mom's face brightened in that brittle, performative way she always used when company was around. "Marvin, I wasn't sure you'd actually come," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "I said I'd be here," I replied evenly. Dylan arrived last, of course, strolling in like the guest of honor. He clapped me on the shoulder as he passed, smirking. "Wow, look who crawled out of his cave. Must be nice to take a break from sulking." I didn't rise to the bait. I just smiled and said, "You're right. It is nice." The first half hour was filled with small talk, mostly my parents bragging about Dylan's plans for grad school. I let them have their moment, nodding occasionally, sipping my water. I could feel the tension buzzing under the surface, but I kept my face neutral. Finally, after the appetizers were cleared, my dad raised his glass. "Well," he said, smiling proudly at Dylan, "your mother and I have a little surprise. We know how hard you've worked, and we want you to start grad school with no worries about money." Dylan grinned, clearly expecting this. My mom reached into her bag and pulled out a card. I assumed some kind of ceremonial check or letter confirming the tuition payment. "That's actually what I wanted to talk about tonight," I said, setting my glass down carefully. Everyone turned to look at me. "What do you mean?" my mom asked, her smile faltering. "I mean the family account," I said, keeping my voice calm and level. "The one you've been collecting money in for the past year. The one with my name on it." My dad's expression changed immediately. "Marvin." I held up a hand. "Don't worry, I didn't spend it. Not a single cent. But I did move it into a trust in my name." The table went silent. My mom blinked at me. Dylan actually laughed. "You're kidding, right?" "No," I said simply. "I have full legal rights as an account holder. I consulted a financial advisor, documented everything, and transferred the funds into a secure trust. They're no longer available for you to use as you see fit. My mom's face flushed. How dare you? How dare I what? I interrupted, my tone sharper now, but still controlled. How dare I stop you from using my name to fund a party I wasn't invited to? From pretending to treat us equally while funneling everything to Dylan. This money was for your brother's education, my dad said, his voice rising. Then maybe you should have opened an account with only his name on it, I replied. You included me, and I'm done letting you use that as leverage. Dylan's smirk had faded now. He leaned back in his chair, frowning. So what? You're just going to keep it? Out of spite. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I'm going to use it for my future. For grad school, for investments, for building a life I actually want. One that doesn't revolve around waiting for scraps from this family. My mom opened her mouth to argue, but I cut her off. This isn't up for debate. I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make sure you all understand that I'm not your scapegoat anymore. You don't get to punish me by holding money over my head. You don't get to use my milestones to make yourselves look good while ignoring me. Not anymore. The silence at the table was deafening. Other diners were starting to glance over, sensing the tension. I leaned back in my chair, calm now. You always told me actions have consequences. Well, so do yours. Then I did something I hadn't planned until that very moment. I reached into my bag, pulled out an envelope, and slid it across the table toward Dylan. He frowned, opened it, and stared at the piece of paper inside. It was a copy of the trust paperwork with the balance printed clearly at the top. That's what you won't be getting, I said evenly. My mom looked like she'd just swallowed a lemon. My dad's jaw was tight. Dylan slammed the envelope shut and shoved it back toward me, his face red. You're unbelievable, he said. Maybe, I said with a shrug. But I'm finally free. I stood up, placed enough cash on the table to cover my meal, and nodded toward the waitress. Thanks for dinner. Then I walked out, leaving them sitting there in stunned silence. By the time I reached my car, my phone was already buzzing. Calls, texts, all of it. I didn't answer a single one. I drove home with the windows down, the night air cool on my face, and for the first time in years, I felt light. But this wasn't just about taking the money. This was about changing the balance forever. And judging by the flood of messages that came over the next 24 hours, some furious, some pleading, I had succeeded. And yet, I had one last thing to do. One last step to make sure they never tried to paint me as the villain again, and to leave them with no doubt that I was done playing the role they'd assigned me. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was still buzzing like it hadn't stopped all night. I had 42 unread texts and 16 missed calls. At first, I ignored them. I made coffee, showered, and sat down at my kitchen table to eat breakfast in silence. But then, curiosity got the better of me. I opened the messages and started reading. My mom had sent a flurry of texts, alternating between guilt trips and accusations. Do you have any idea how much you humiliated us last night? This isn't how family treats each other. You should be ashamed of yourself. We were counting on that money for Dylan's tuition. How could you do this to your own brother? My dad's messages were shorter, but angrier. Grow up. You don't understand what sacrifice means. You're throwing this family away over your ego. And then there were Dylan's. Hope you're proud of yourself. You just ruined my future. This is why no one takes you seriously. Mom cried herself to sleep last night. You happy? I stared at the screen for a long moment, then set the phone down and took a slow sip of my coffee. I wasn't happy, exactly, but I wasn't guilty either. For the first time in years, their words didn't feel like shackles. That afternoon, my aunt called. She was the only one I answered. I can't believe you did that, she said, though her tone sounded more impressed than angry. I didn't do anything wrong, I said calmly. It's my legal right. I know, she admitted after a pause. And honestly, good for you. Your parents have been playing favorites for as long as I can remember. Maybe this will finally wake them up. Maybe, I said, though I didn't actually believe it. The fallout started almost immediately. My parents posted a long, emotional message on Facebook about being betrayed by those closest to you. It was vague, but everyone in the extended family knew exactly who they were talking about. Some relatives took their side, sending me messages about forgiveness and family unity. Others stayed silent, which told me they understood more than they were willing to say out loud. And then came the real consequence. My parents canceled Dylan's car insurance and told him he'd have to start making the payments himself. I found out from my aunt, who who said Dylan had thrown a fit so loud the neighbors heard him. Apparently, he'd accused my parents of ruining his life by letting me steal his money, which led to a screaming match that ended with Dylan storming out of the house. I didn't celebrate, but I won't lie, I felt a sense of justice in knowing they were finally dealing with the mess they'd created. A week later, I got an email from my dad. It wasn't long, but it was the first time I'd seen him acknowledge the situation without anger. "Marvin, your mother and I have been talking. We still think what you did was wrong, but we realize we might have made you feel less important over the years. That was never our intention. If you want to talk, we're willing to listen." I read it twice, then closed the laptop. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a few days to think. Did I want to talk? Did I want to let them back into my life now that I'd finally carved out some peace? On the third day, I sent a short reply. "I'm open to talking, but if we do, it has to be on equal ground. No yelling, no guilt trips, no dismissing my feelings. If you can do that, we can try." They didn't respond right away, but eventually my mom sent back a simple, "Okay." I didn't rush over. I didn't set a date. I let the silence sit, because for once, it was on my terms. In the meantime, I kept building my life. The trust stayed intact, my savings grew, and I started seriously looking at grad schools. I had options now, real ones, and no one could take them away from me. The real moment of closure came a month later. I got another invitation to the house, this time for a family dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. When I arrived, the atmosphere was different, quieter. My mom looked tired, my dad looked older, and Dylan was uncharacteristically silent. We sat down at the table, and for the first time, no one made a joke at my expense. No one compared me to Dylan. No one minimized what I'd done. Halfway through the meal, my dad cleared his throat. "We're not perfect," he said slowly. "And maybe we should have done better at making you feel like you mattered as much as your brother." It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I'd ever gotten before. I nodded, not smiling but not angry either. "That's a start," I said simply. The rest of the dinner passed without incident. When I left that night, my mom hugged me at the door, stiff, hesitant, but it was something. Dylan barely looked at me, but for once, he didn't say anything smug. When I got back to my apartment, I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at the life I'd built, the job, the savings, the independence. I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked over to the wall where my diploma hung, straightened it, and whispered to myself, "I'm not invisible anymore." And that was the end of it. Not a dramatic blow-up, not a fairy tale reunion, just the quiet, steady knowledge that I'd finally reclaimed my life. That night, as I turned off the lights and got ready for bed, my phone buzzed one last time. It was a text from my dad. "We're proud of you, Marvin. Truly." I set the phone down, smiled to myself, and went to sleep. For the first time in a long time, it wasn't just a good night. It felt like the beginning of a better life.